Therese Raquin Tezak is an 1868 novel by French writer Émile Zole, first published in serial form in the literary magazine L'Artiste in 1867. It was Zole's third novel, though the first to earn wide fame. The novel's adultery and murder were considered scandalous and famously described as putrid in a review in the newspaper Le Figaro. Émile Édouard Charles Antoine Zole, Zole 1-2, also U.S. Zole 3-4 French. Émile Zole, 2 April 1840 to the 29th of September 1902, 5, was a French novelist, journalist, playwright, the best-known practitioner of the literary school of naturalism, and an important contributor to the development of theatrical naturalism. 6. He was a major figure in the political liberalization of France and in the exoneration of the falsely accused and convicted army officer Alfred Dreyfus, which is encapsulated in his renowned newspaper opinion headline J'accuse. Zole was nominated for the first and second Nobel Prize in Literature in 1901 and 1902. Therese Raquin tells the story of a young woman, unhappily married to her first cousin by an overbearing aunt, who may seem to be well-intentioned but in many ways is deeply selfish. Therese's husband, Camille, is sickly and egocentric, and when the opportunity arises, Therese enters into a turbulent and sordidly passionate affair with one of Camille's friends, Laurent. In his preface, Zole explains that his goal in this novel was to study temperaments and not characters. 2. Because of this detached and scientific approach, Therese Raquin is considered an example of naturalism. Therese Raquin was first adapted for the stage as an 1873 play written by Zole himself. It has since then been adapted numerous times as films, TV miniseries, musicals and an opera, among others. Summary. Therese Raquin is the daughter of a French sea captain and an Algerian mother. After her mother's death, her father takes her to live with her aunt, Madame Raquin, and Camille, her valetudinarian son. Because her son is so ill, Madame Raquin dotes on him to the point of spoiling him, and he is very selfish. Camille and Therese grow up side by side, and Madame Raquin marries them to each other when Therese turns 21. Shortly thereafter, Camille decides that the family should move to Paris so he can pursue a career. Therese and Madame Raquin set up shop in the Passage du Pont Neuf to support Camille while he searches for a job. He eventually starts working for the Orléans Railway Company, where he runs into a childhood friend, Laurent. Laurent visits the Raquins and, while painting a portrait of Camille, contemplates an affair with the lonely Therese, mostly because he cannot afford prostitutes anymore. It soon becomes a torrid love affair. They meet regularly and secretly in Therese's room. After some time, Laurent's boss no longer allows him to leave early, so the lovers must think of something new. Therese comes up with the idea of killing Camille, and they become infatuated with the idea of being able to be together permanently while being married. It seems Camille is the only obstacle in this. They eventually drown him during a boat trip, though in defending himself Camille succeeds in biting Laurent on the neck. Madame Raquin is in shock after hearing of her son's disappearance. Everybody believes that the drowning was an accident and that the couple actually tried to save Camille. Laurent is still uncertain about whether Camille is truly dead and frequently visits the mortuary, which he persists in although it disturbs him, until he finally finds the dead body there. Therese becomes far more nervous and has nightmares. The previously calm and centered Laurent also becomes nervous. Their feelings toward each other are greatly changing, but they still plot to marry without raising suspicion and therefore reap the rewards of their actions. Therese acts very subdued around family and acquaintances, and Laurent publicly shows great concern and care for her, so Michaud, one of the family's regular visitors, decides that Therese should remarry and her ideal husband should be Laurent. They finally marry, but they're haunted by the memory of the murder. Laurent's bite scar serves as a constant reminder for them both. They have hallucinations of the dead Camille in their bed every night, preventing them from touching each other and quickly driving them even more insane. They vacillate between trying desperately to rekindle their passion to get rid of the corpse hallucinations and trying to heal the bite scar and despising each other. Laurent, previously an untalented artist, is suddenly struck with surprising talent and skill, but he can no longer paint a picture, even a landscape, which does not in some way resemble the dead man. Sickened by this, he gives up art. They must also tend Madame Raquin, who suffered a stroke after Camille's death. She suffers a second stroke and becomes completely paralyzed except for her eyes, after which Therese and Laurent accidentally reveal the murder in her presence during one of their many arguments. 3. Madame Raquin, previously blissfully happy, is now filled with rage, disgust and horror. During an evening game of dominoes with friends, Madame Raquin manages to move her finger with an extreme effort of will to trace words on the table, Therese et Laurent ont. The complete sentence was intended to be, Therese et Laurent ont tué Camille, Therese and Laurent killed Camille. At this point her strength gives out and the words are interpreted as, Therese and Laurent look after me very well. Therese and Laurent find life together intolerable. Laurent has started beating Therese, something she deliberately provokes in order to distract her from her life. Therese has convinced herself that Madame Raquin has forgiven her and spends hours kissing her and praying at the disabled woman's feet. The couple argue almost constantly about Camille and who was responsible for his death, so they exist in an endless waking nightmare. They are being driven to rashly plot to murder each other. At the novel's climax, they're about to kill each other when each realizes the other's plan. They break down sobbing in silent agreement of what they should do next, and reflect on their miserable lives. After a final embrace, they commit suicide by taking poison supplied by Laurent, all in front of the hate-filled, watchful gaze of Madame Raquin. Therese Raquin, the eponymous protagonist, is the wife of Camille and the orphaned daughter of Madame Raquin's brother and an unknown African woman. Camille Raquin, Therese's husband and first cousin. Madame Raquin, Camille's mother and Therese's aunt. She works as a shopkeeper to support her family. Laurent, a childhood friend and co-worker of Camille who seduces Therese. Michaud, the police commissioner and friend of Madame Raquin. Olivier, Michaud's son who works at the police prefecture. Suzanne, Olivier's wife. Grivet, an elderly employee of the Orléans Railroad Company, where Camille works. François, the Raquin's cat. Punishment and imprisonment. Throughout the book there are references to chains, cages, tombs and pits. These contribute to the impression that Laurent and Therese are in a state of remorse and are plagued by guilt. The book mentions how they are always clawing at the chains that bound them together. The shop that Therese owns is compared to a tomb, where Therese watches corpses walk by in the day. Temperaments. In his preface to the second edition, Zole writes that he intended to study temperaments and not characters. To his main characters, he assigns various humors according to Galen's 4 temperaments. Therese is melancholic, Laurent is sanguine, Camille is phlegmatic and Madame is choleric. For Zole, the interactions of these types of personalities could only have the result that plays out in his plot. Human beast. Also in his preface, Zole calls both Therese and Laurent human brutes, and the characters are often given animal tendencies. Zole would take up this idea again in his Le Bête Humaine 1890. Therese Raquin is generally considered to be Zole's first major work. Upon its release in 1867, Therese Raquin was a commercial and artistic success for Zole. This led to a reprint in book form in 1868. It gained additional publicity when critic Louis Ulbach, pen name Farragut, called Therese Raquin putrid in a long diatribe for Le Figaro. Zole capitalized on this for publicity and referred to it in his preface to the second edition. 4. Zole's book provided the clear inspiration for James M. Cain's 1934 novel The Postman Always Rings Twice, which has a similar plot. 5.